Friday now, friends. Greg Koukl here, and thanks for being on the show, joining me on the show. For those who are going to be on the show, because you're going to call in, 855-243-9975. Looking forward to all of that. Hey, quick update. In 2 days, I climb on an airplane for Minneapolis. We've got, actually, some people are leaving tomorrow. This is a church that holds 4,000 people. Last count earlier today, 2,957. There are 43 more seats needed to be sold for us to break 3,000. And when you have 3,000 in a church of 4,000, that pretty much feels full. But we still got room for more. So if you haven't signed up, go to, realityapologetics.com and check it out. Sign up. Love to see you there. Big event coming up this weekend. Very excited about it. I will also be speaking that morning, make that Friday morning, which is the morning of the evening where we start the event at Grace Church, Eden Prairie. But I will be at, Search Ministry Breakfast in Edna, Minnesota. Edna, E-D-N-A. I've done this breakfast. This is my third time. I love working with these people. And it's the kind of thing where they bring your friend, businessmen show up at Dark 30 and have breakfast and listen to a presentation. And I'll be talking about science and faith. Are they compatible? You can find the details at str.org/events. That's the skinny there. John Noyes will be Wednesday on his own event, streaming live on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. On our platform, that would be To The Point Live, and he'll be talking about the problem of evil there. Tune in at 6 p.m. PST. Notice that's S. That's standard time. We're no longer on daylight. And boy, that always throws me for a loop. I feel like I'm ready to go to bed, man. What time is it? 4:30. What? It's dark out. All right, so that always messes me up a little bit. But all that coming up here, isn't Tim? Maybe Tim's already done his thing. But we are thrilled that it is very likely we're going to break 3,000. And at 2,957 right now, that's our PB. That is our personal best for rethinks. No, I'm sorry, for reality. See, I'm still in the old mode here. Before I get to callers, and they're starting to come in, I just made a brief promise on when I did a little video blurb announcing the show. I think it goes up on Twitter. And I announced one thing, I'm going to do another. So sorry about that. At least start with something else. And that is because I have been getting some pushback in a number of areas, partly because I've talked about CRT and organizations that are Christian organizations that are embracing CRT, and I'm sounding a warning about it, and also some other things. And the accusation that I've been getting, or the concern that has been expressed to me and through Stand to Reason, is that we're getting political. Okay, now I talked about that issue more broadly a few weeks ago, but I just want to say something about this, that Stand to Reason has a goal, and that is to train Christians to think more clearly about their convictions and to defend those convictions of classical Christianity and classical Christian values in the public square. It's pretty straightforward. All right? And what we are trying to do, and this is more like our vision, is to give confidence to every Christian, clear thinking to every challenge, or for every challenge, and courage and grace for every encounter. Now, the reason that we are positioned this way is because we are always, as Christians, encounter pushback from the culture. And the pushback from the culture sometimes is so aggressive that it causes Christians to wonder about their own convictions. And so apologetics is meant to address not just the challenger for the challenger's sake, but the challenges for the Christian's sake. And now there are all kinds of challenges coming at the Christian. And some of the challenges are substantive. You're wrong because of this, okay? And some of the challenges are in a different category. And they're so new, this category, that I don't even know how to characterize it, because it is not content. And again, I'm trying to think of a way to address it. But it's been something, or to summarize it, but I've been talking about it writing about it all year long, from the very first Solid Ground in January. Because there is an oppressiveness that they have to answer now. Not just resistance that's, in a sense, rational or intellectual or emotional or whatever, but there is an oppression that's happening. And this has happened to Christians from the very beginning, and we see it in Jesus' warning to the disciples in Matthew 10. I read that passage frequently. Do not fear them. Do not fear them. Do not fear them. He says it 3 times in the space of 6 verses. He makes a little different application in each case, but why is he saying these things? Because you're going to run into trouble. And the trouble isn't just the claims against you, it's the oppression against you. It's the pushback, it's the suffering that you will experience as a result of the hostility that people have towards Christ that they are expressing towards us. All right? So what are we to do? Stand to reason. It's our job to help the body of Christ. And in part because in many occasions the local church is not doing that. It may not be capable of doing it. It may not have the ability to answer the challenges. I get that. That's why we're here. We tell pastors we want to make your job easier, but there's some pastors who say we don't want to deal with these things because it's, now here comes the word, politics. We don't want to get political. I'm actually writing a piece that's coming out January 1st on this. I am so concerned about the deleterious effect this kind of concern or complaint has on our ability to make the case for Christianity. And the reason, it's not because I want to become a political activist group and start marches and walking around and hold up signs and telling people what party to vote for. That's not what we do. What we do is we deal with the world of ideas. And we focus on issues that are worldview issues, that are moral issues, that are issues that have to do with the question of what does it mean to be human? And whether God exists and he has any authority to say how we ought to be living in our lives. And what it means for the government to be punishing evildoers and praising those who do right instead of the opposite. These are all biblical concerns, but they are all now described as political. Even though all of these have always been within the domain of Christianity. They are worldview concerns that, as it turns out now, because of the way the government has gotten so big and expanded and covers everything, it seems now, those things that have been the province of the church broadly, the Christian worldview, now have policy ramifications. And that's because of the way the concept of politics has now spread to every area of life. The struggle is a political struggle. That's Marxism, but that's what's happened here. Everything is politics. And so that which used to be our domain is no longer our domain. All right? For example, Christians were told, by the way, abortion is not merely a moral issue anymore, it's political. Well, what about the immorality of alternate sexuality like lesbianism and homosexuality and incest? Oh, that's ours too. That's political. Well, what about marriage, like same-sex marriage? That's political, a civic concern, no place for the church. Family issues like divorce and child support and reproductive technologies, the education of our children. Back off. Stewardship of the environment, care of the poor, sex education, birth control, sexual harassment, pornography, child porn, all politics. So it should not be surprising then that when we address those issues that we have always addressed that have now been encroached on by a secular culture and made political, that we be called, we be accused of getting too much involved in politics. But we haven't changed. The definitions have changed. The culture has changed. The encroachment has changed. The enemies aren't at the gate. They're in our living rooms. They're in our schools. And, I'm thinking right now of a federal action recently that is an example of this kind of encroachment. But I know if I say it, the news item, then that's going to bother people. So I'm just going to, lay off on that for the moment. But to point out that Jesus talked about this kind of oppression that would come upon us and, frankly, has been upon Christian churches for 2,000 years. And for the last 250 years, we've dodged the bullet. But we're not dodging it now. People are losing their jobs. People are being silenced from expressing their views because they're just politically incorrect. They are losing their situations, being thrown out of schools. Why? Because of their Christian views. And so they don't voice their Christian views. And therefore, we are not the salt and light that we were meant to be. That's part of our role. We're not just here to save souls. That's not my view. That wasn't Mother Teresa's view. That wasn't Martin Luther King's view. That wasn't William Wilberforce's view. Their transformed lives drove them to make a difference in transforming the lives of others and also the culture for the good of others. And ironically, William Wilberforce was an MP. That would be Member of Parliament, one of the youngest in Parliament's history at that point. I think he was 23 years old? Or 24, possibly? And his buddy Pitt was prime minister a year older. And he didn't think that it was inappropriate for him to use his changed life seeking to transform circumstances for other people's lives by getting political. The main point I'm making here is we're just doing the same thing we have always done. It's just that there has been a section of society who has encroached on all of these issues because of the growing size and reach of government that has essentially, functionally labeled these things as political. And if our view is that we can't do anything political, all they have to do is move into our front rooms, call it political, and we wave the white flag. That's it. Now, there are a lot of things that are definitely political that we're just not going to touch on because it's not in our wheelhouse. What's our wheelhouse? Christian worldview and its ramifications for living a robust Christian life. And this entails the issue of liberty. And so when our liberty is being squelched, there is a role that citizens with suffrage, in other words, we are people who can make a difference with our vote and our influence in our community, ought to be doing that for the sake of freedom. Because freedom aids the cause of the proclamation of the gospel. What could be more obvious? In those places where freedom is taken away and liberty is squelched, the gospel is silenced. Now, it can't be silenced completely. We know this because God's in this. The gates of hell will not prevail against God's church. The word of God abides forever, all of that. But it's a lot harder when there's aggressive oppression from above, and that Christians should have something to say to that. And they did. I worked with Christians behind the Iron Curtain back in the in the 70s, 1976. I was in 5 communist countries, including the former Soviet Union, in the Ukraine and in the Moldavia. And on that border station of Moldavia, I wrote about that in January in Iron Curtain Diary, Our Solid Ground. You can find it on our web, about how we were stopped and our Bibles were taken from us and we were interrogated for 7 hours or whatever before we were finally allowed to go along with, after having been chastised and told not to do this anymore. And visiting the Christians then that were suffering under that circumstance. We couldn't bring Bibles in. They weren't allowed to have Bibles. Is the Bible important for Christian growth? Of course it is. So when you live in a totalitarian environment, something important for your spiritual growth has deprived you. So that means there are spiritual ramifications to totalitarianism. So that means if we want to grow as Christians, then we oppose the thing that keeps us from growing as Christians. Well, this is not rocket science. And different people in the body of Christ address the issue in maybe a different fashion. So there are some people that are like a Wilberforce who's going to run for office, and this is where he's going to make his case. It's not where we make our case. All right? We make our case right here, on the air, in our writings. Okay? But we cannot make the case anymore for the things that the Christian worldview speaks to that are morally weighty without being accused and in fact guilty of touching on things that are politics. But that's not because we've moved. It's because politics has moved and has taken over more of our life. You know that I'm reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, William Shearer's wonderful work. I'm page 753 last night. It's 1,200, almost 1,300 pages. And, well, anyway, I guess I was going to say something that I've read, but I'm just going to let it lie for the moment. All right. What I see is not good here. It's not good for Christianity. It's not good for Christians, and it's not good for anybody's liberty. Okay. So it's appropriate to speak to that and warn. And when Christian organizations are somehow, I think, sometimes unwittingly abetting that enterprise, and I think that is the case with CRT, critical race theory, then it is appropriate for somebody who has some insight into what's going on or thinks they do, that would be yours truly in this particular case, to say, here's what I see. Beware. Danger awaits you. Look before you leap, you know. There is a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the way of death. That verse is repeated twice in Proverbs. Not a lot of content given there. It's just that there are things that we get deceived on. Okay, so we try really hard at STR not to be deceived on these things. We've got a group of people that are really smart. We run things back and forth by each other. We know the word. We're trying to be faithful. We understand the culture. We understand these cultural ideas that grab hold in ways that other people don't. And so we're just letting you know. Now, if you find that out, and we just got some information recently on this, and maybe Amy and I will talk about this more next week. If there's a person who finds out what our views are, how Christianity actually speaks to these particular ideas in the culture, and you don't like what it says, all right, find another religion. That's fine with me. But what we're not going to do is we are not going to what's the opposite of double down? We're not going to back off. We're not going to just not tell the truth regarding these things. If you think you're a Christian and you find out that Christianity is not pro-sexual promiscuity, or let's just say sexual adventuring, so as not to have that negative connotation of that word promiscuity. It's not pro-heterosexual sex, homosexual sex, adultery, all that other stuff. If you learn that Christianity is binary when it comes to sexuality, because that's the way God made it. If you learn that what the Bible teaches makes it clear that abortion is wrong, and you don't like any of those things, fine. You don't have to be a Christian. But don't embrace Christianity and try to make it into something it isn't. Because it's not our job to make it or break it in that sense. It is not moldable. God has already spoken on these things. And if we're going to, and Jesus too. And if we're going to follow Jesus, we follow him. We don't try to get him to follow us. That's all we're doing. This is Jesus. This is what he says. This is what the word he inspired says regarding these issues. There it is. Like it or lump it, that's up to you. But don't call it political and ask me to shut up. All right? Or anybody else that's a follower of Christ. Maybe that's a strong way of putting it. But don't call it political and say you're out of line. We're not. We are still addressing the same issues we've always addressed from the same source of information, the Word of God. It has just gotten much more politically incorrect to do that because politics have absorbed so many of these areas that were the province of the church and the individual and the family. It no longer is because of the trend of the government. Increasing oppression has taken this away, and that's a threat, and that's what we speak to as well. So there you have it. Maybe in the next segment I can talk about what I'd originally planned to talk about. Let's go to break and then to your calls. Okay, friends, your turn. Kind of. To the phones, and it feels like I'm supposed to be making an announcement, but since I can't think of what it is, I'll just pass and go to Mid-Coast. Oh, my goodness. JJ.
Hey, Mr. Koukl.
I can't listen to that deep baritone, man. You're grown up. JJ, I got your picture right here in front of me. Honest to goodness. And
what year is that one from?
This is 2017.
Ooh.
And you are, it says there you're 18. So that's like 5 and 8. You're 23 now or 24?
I'm 22.
Oh, 22. Okay.
Yeah.
I am thrilled.
Yes, I feel kind of grown up.
Well, you are kind of grown up. You were grown up even when you weren't grown up, in my opinion. You and your brother, Josh, how's he doing?
He's doing wonderful.
And do you guys still
following the Lord? And
that is wonderful. And are you guys still doing your fishing podcast?
Unfortunately, we kind of stopped that because of time constraints.
Oh yeah, okay.
So
and I'm looking
when you're grown up, there's other things that take precedent.
There is so much.
A fishing podcast.
There is so much wisdom in that, and I wish that more young people like yourself had the same point of view. That's why I said you were grown up even before you're grown up, because this is the way your family raised you, and it's smart. When you start growing up, you say no to childish things, childlike things, or the things of childhood, And and now you got bigger responsibilities. So I'm impressed. I'm looking at the you and your brother, and also the other 5 in your family, which is 2 more boys and 3 girls, and so they must be they must also be 4 years older too. Since it's been 4 years since I got this picture, so I imagine they're sprouting up.
Oh yes, the youngest is 9 now, so. We got to get you an updated Christmas card, I think.
Yes, that's what I have here.
We'll definitely send you one this year.
Yeah, okay.
Sure, yeah.
Please do that. So, what can I help you with, Mr. JJ?
Well, I heard the call a couple of months ago now, I believe it was, on whether, Bethel music and Hillsong music should be sung in church or listened to, by Christians. And I wanted you to expound on that a little bit more, because if Hillsong, Bethel, and Elevation and other churches like that are false churches, and there seems to be good evidence that they are.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't seem it would be okay to sing music that, you know, their worship teams have written and, you know, produced for their church and to sell. And, you know, for the average Christian in a church, if they see that, you know, that their local church is singing that,
mm-hmm.
they may think Hillsong, Bethel, Elevation are okay, and, you know, go further with whatever doctrine they're
right
promoting or whatever, even if the song itself is legit and doctrinally sound.
Uh-huh.
You know, the teaching of the church itself is not.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering
about
that.
It's a very good question. I'm glad you brought it up. And there are actually two separate issues that are involved. But let me back up for a moment and just make an observation. In church on Sunday, we sang "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God," okay, which is written by Martin Luther. And I heard that Luther wrote a number of hymns or about songs, but what he did, and this could be mistaken, but what he did is he took some old drinking songs and he put Christian words to them. So the music was, you know, barroom songs, but the lyrics were Christian. I don't know that that's the case with The Mighty Fortress, but in any event, I thought that was kind of a chuckle because here he is, he redeems something that maybe, at least in one sense, had a questionable source, and he used it for something good. And if A Mighty Fortress Is Our God was an old drinking song, at least the music, before new lyrics were added to it, it doesn't trouble me at all. Because I don't think there's anything, in a certain sense, evil in the music itself. And if it can be repurposed for a better use, that's fine. God had the Jews be circumcised, Abraham, right? But circumcision was practiced by the Egyptians before that for a different purpose. So something that might have been used in a pagan context is now being repurposed, and therefore the theological substance of it is changing. It's being invested with other substance. So those are just some general things to think about. And this is why, for me, when it comes to, remember I said there are two issues, so I'm just going to talk about the first one. And you brought them both up. But so the first one, the songs, if the songs are edifying, if they're beautiful, if they have good content theologically and are sound in all of those ways, then I have no problem with them being sung. I couldn't identify Hillsong or Bethel songs from others. If somebody started singing a song, I might recognize it and I say, well, that's a Hillsong song. Well, I don't, because I'm not a worship leader, so I don't know who's connected to what song. I know that there's a lot of songs that are written by, people that are fine that are lousy songs. And then there may be songs that are written by people who aren't so fine that turn out to be good songs, not just good musically, but good theologically as far as they go. So what I'm saying here, and if you disagree, this is fine, and you can tell me if you do, but as with regards to the first issue, can I sing a song that comes from a questionable source if the song itself is not questionable? And my answer to that is yes. There may be a kind of a genetic fallacy operating there, where we fault something on its source and not on its content. All right. So
I could totally see that, and I don't want to commit that genetic fallacy.
Yeah. Okay. So good. And no, but there's one other little wrinkle to that first issue and first point, and that is if somebody understands the problems with the sources and says, well, I'm not going to commit the fallacy, but I don't have to sing the song because I don't like it. There might be some, I think the Russian anthem is a beautiful anthem. It's just really masculine, and the Russian, when they do this thing, I don't even know it by heart, but I recognize it. I think it's magnificent. But it was the anthem of the Soviet Union, you know what I mean? And those guys were pretty grotesque as an authoritative authoritarian kind of government, a despotic kind of government. But I thought the music was grand, all right? But some other people who grew up underneath that might say, yeah, it is beautiful, and I'm not singing it because I lived in that circumstance. So I'm saying that there is a personal element that goes beyond the actual moral side of it, that a person might be totally justified in saying, not for me. Okay, I'm with that. So that's the first issue. Now, the second issue you brought up is, to me, more substantive in a certain sense, and that is, if we are singing music from a questionable source, maybe that will confer legitimacy to that source from people who are singing the music. And this is, this borderline causing your brother to stumble. You're doing something that, in my view, is not morally inappropriate in itself, but then can lead to some kind of immoral result in a person's life. And that is a totally legitimate consideration. And this becomes a judgment call.
Could I jump in?
Sure.
For 1 second? What you said about causing your brother to stumble, you're talking about the meat sacrifice to idols issue, right?
Well, that's the way it's described there, but the broad issue is when somebody is doing something that is morally benign, but it causes another person to sin. And then it's no longer morally benign. So in this case, if I'm arguing the songs are morally benign if they're good songs in the ways that I said, but it causes somebody to attach themselves to bad theology, now you're causing a different problem, and that is a legitimate concern. And that's how it's kin to the meat sacrifice to idols. Was that your concern?
Yeah,
just clarification on that?
Well, I have on my notes here, I was going to bring up the issue. Is this an issue that is similar to eating meat sacrificed to idols?
Oh, it's interesting.
Maybe you're going to go into that. I don't want to jump ahead too far, but
no, that was my point.
Like it may have some correlation. Yeah.
Yes, it may. Okay, and so that's the question. The second issue you brought up that has to be asked: is this use of this song going to cause people to connect with the theology of those two enterprises and hurt them? And I think that's a fair question, but it has to be answered. I don't think it can just be thrown out there and then presumed that that's the case. If a person is going to a good church and they happen to see Hillsong up there underneath the little title from the music, it doesn't strike me that that's going to cause them to find out about Hillsong and follow their theology. It doesn't. Maybe somebody have done that. I don't know, but I have never been tempted to look at anything about the author of the song. I've just sung the song that was up there because it was good, and okay, here's the copyright information. Fine, all right. But there might be people who say, "Oh, I really like that music, so I want more of their stuff," and then they're getting stuff that is not so good. What I'm saying is, I think, JJ, that is an absolutely legitimate concern, but it's a judgment call. It may or may not be the case. And if for a person who wants to stay really safe, don't use that music. Use something else. There's plenty of good music out there. The other thing, I don't know if it's always required. I know it's the standard practice to put the source, the source of the music underneath the script of the music. I don't know if that's legally required or that just shows that you paid the fee or whatever, however that works. One way around it, if it wasn't legally required, you just don't put that up there. If it's a good song, people don't even know who wrote it. Just sing their song, right?
Yeah, I don't know if it's legally required, but according to the Christian copyright something, it's whatever the Christian copyright organization is for the songs.
Yeah.
A royalty is supposed to be paid whenever a Hillsong is sung.
Right.
Based on the copyright.
Yeah, they get a nickel or whatever every time you sing it. I don't know, but is it required?
Which is also an issue if that's going to Hillsong. Technically, you're supporting their ministry.
Well, I don't know if that's true.
But I guess you could say
it's
that
like a
about other
royalty.
things, like if you go to Walmart, you're technically supporting the corporation, which is, supporting things that we don't support.
Yeah,
So.
my view is when you give the money, you are purchasing a product, and there's nothing immoral about purchasing the product. What the corporation does with the money is their business, not ours. And I'm not. My view is that I'm not morally responsible for what they do with the money that they earn when I purchase a product. And when we're singing a song, and we pay the nickel or dime or whatever it is for it, we are paying the writer for giving us the opportunity to sing the good song. That doesn't necessarily mean we are supporting their enterprise. However, even so, if people feel uncomfortable with this, I'm entirely fine with people saying I'm not gonna buy that product, whether it's something from Walmart because they don't like whatever, or even from Hillsong because they just don't want to do it. And I think a person has the right to do that, and I respect that. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
So I'm
good
sympathetic to this concern. I don't like the way these organizations have gone, especially the Bethel group, but they can write good music. I mean, I'm a former Catholic, but there's some very nice music Catholics have written, and in fact there's a hymn that's one of my favorite, "Come Thou Fount." You know that song?
Mm-hmm.
The guy
I haven't sung it personally, but I know. I know the song, yeah.
Prone to wander, Lord, I feel it. Prone to leave the Lord I love. That's a line in that song. And I actually love the music, and I love the song, and I also like it because I identify with that line that I'm a fallen person that can easily stray in particulars from God, Turns out that guy left the Lord. The guy who wrote that famous hymn, "Come Thou Fount of Every Blessing" is the name of the song. But he defected, as I understand it. So
yeah, I heard that too. I was researching, hymns that have questionable backgrounds, and that was one that came up.
But to me, that doesn't cast any aspersions on the hymn itself, just because the guy who wrote it didn't stay with the faith. And so I don't know. I have a famous hymnist in my background. I didn't learn about it until I became a Christian. But the "What a Friend We Have in Jesus," Charles Converse was one of the authors. You usually have one do the music and one do the words, and I can't remember which one he did. But he was a great uncle of mine on my grandfather, my maternal grandfather's side. So that was kind of cool. My grandfather's name was Converse.
That is cool.
But I'm not like taking any like spiritual credit. I don't think none of it passed down to me. But he has quite a story, and I have an accounting of that story in my Evernote somewhere. I'll have to read it before too long. But anyway, I think that there is some legitimate differences of opinion on the questions you've asked. I've offered mine. If people disagree, if you disagree, that's fine. Follow your conscience would be my point. And I do think there are problems with Bethel, and also with Hillsong, and these are quite famous now, but they've gotten a lot of visibility.
Yeah, it's the fastest growing movement in the world as far as it relates to Christianity.
Which movement? The Hillsong? Because Hillsong and Bethel are different, right? Hillsong is more word faith, and Bethel is New Apostolic Reformation. So they are separate enterprises.
The prosperity gospel movement,
which
Hillsong. They are part of.
You mean Hillsong?
Well, both churches have similar elements in that regard, and the pastors go back and forth between the churches sometimes.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, see, now you've taught me something.
The Hillsong has hosted every prosperity gospel or famous prosperity gospel preacher within the last couple of years. So.
Well, that's not a good sign. That's not a good sign.
No.
It's.
Hey, in regards to your first point, I just had a thought earlier. Let's say Planned Parenthood wrote a Christian song that was doctrinally sound. Would that change anything as far as whether we should sing it or not?
No, that wouldn't bother me. In fact, when I first became a Christian, Oh, who is this? I have to, Amy. I'm trying to think of the name. There was a very well-known Christian writer then who wrote who wrote a song called "Why Me, Lord." Okay, yeah. If you look it up, can you look it up, Amy? She's gonna look up "Why Me, Lord." What have I ever done to deserve even one of the blessings you've so put? Chris Christopherson. There you go. Chris Christopherson just came to mind. Now, Chris Christopherson, I have no reason to believe that he's still a Christian, but he had some kind of religious experience back in the 70s. And he wrote this song, Why Me, Lord? It's great. It's a great song. I can even still sing it now. I kind of just did a little bit, sort of, kind of. But I could sing that song to myself. Why me, Lord? Lord help me, Jesus. Da, da, da. There's something, there's an appeal there, and it's a song to Jesus, and there's nothing wrong with a single lyric, even though Chris Christopherson, and who knows where he's at now, spiritually, is the one who wrote it. Okay, I think Bob Dylan wrote some songs when he had his kind of Christian thing, and I don't know if he's whatever with him, but if the song has good substance and good, proper lyrics, it does not matter to me whose pen put the song to paper, so to speak. So now there are going to be people disagree, and okay, that's all right with me. You can disagree, I respect that, but that's my take on it. And I do think if you want to use a more formal, rational thing, it does strike me that a disqualification is an example of a genetic fallacy. Now, even with Chris Christopherson, that other issue comes in. Well, if I sing this song and I like that, I might just become a fan of Christopherson and sing a whole bunch of garbage. I don't know. So that's a judgment call regarding his other work, which I'm not that familiar with. So anyway, hey, I want to know something though, just kind of off the record a little bit. If I put you on,
sure.
If I put you on hold, and Amy, I'm going to get Amy's. Can you give? I don't think I have your family's address or phone number, and maybe you could give that to Amy. Okay.
Sure.
Is that all right? So I'm going to put you.
Yeah.
Is that the top button, Amy? Yeah, top button. Okay, I'm going to put you on hold. But I just want to know, JJ, I'm so glad you called me back. And I haven't heard from you or your family members for a long time, but I've been looking at your face every single week when I come into the studio. All righty?
Ooh, that sounds nice, Greg. Mr. Koukl, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you for your input as well.
Thank you, buddy. I'm going to say hi to your folks for me. I'm going to put you on hold, and you can talk to Amy. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right.
Have a great night.
Thank you. Okay, now he's on hold. Great. Now I've been talking to him for so long, I don't have time for a break. I want to keep moving here. And in Reading, Pennsylvania, that would be Dan. Hello, Dan. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Greg. Thanks so much for taking my call.
You're welcome. JJ is in Midcoast, Maine, and you're in Reading, Pennsylvania. You're kind of up in the same national neck of the woods, I'd say.
That's right, yeah, the greater Northeast area.
Yeah. And did you know we're having a reality coming to Pennsylvania in the spring?
I heard, like Philadelphia, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's either, let me just look here. Right now it's March 25 and 26. That's the current deal, though. So where's Reading?
Reading is about 50 miles northwest of Philadelphia.
Oh, so you're easily within striking distance. I had to drive that far just to get to the studio today. in L.A.
Yeah.
traffic, no less. So,
yeah.
So, Dan, what's on your mind?
Well, we had talked a few weeks ago about morality and the objective nature of it, and myself as a non-Christian looking to a way to ground objective morality. I don't know how much of that conversation you remember.
I just vaguely remember our conversation, but not really the details.
Sure. I was just curious. A lot of terminology and stuff came up in the conversation. I was curious about one thing.
Okay.
If you thought that moral relativism and moral subjectivism were the same term, or whether they meant slightly different things.
No, they're the same thing. Moral non-realism is another synonym. These are terms of art in the discipline, and there may be people that use them in different ways, but I'm just saying I have a master's degree in philosophy in the area of ethics and morality. Ethics and religion. That's my specialty in terms of my MA Phil. And I wrote a book on moral relativism. You know, I'm sure you know that. So when
Yes.
people talk about moral relativism, what is morality relative to? What is it based on? What is it tied to? Well, it's relative to the subject, which is why it's called subjectivism. And moral relativism is the idea that the thing that makes the truth maker of a moral claim is the belief of the subject. If the subject believes it's true, that's all that's necessary to make the moral claim true. But they call it non-realism, moral non-realism, because morality is not a real feature of the universe. It is merely an opinion, a category that is attached by a subject to a behavior.
That makes sense. Would you consider, like if somebody said that moral relativism is about one culture says one thing about morality, in other words, it's relative to the culture that the environment that it's placed in. Would you think that sort of moral relativism is subjectivism, or is that something a little different?
Well, it depends how the statement is phrased, and not to unnecessarily split hairs here, but there is a distinction. There is a view called conventionalism and also cultural relativism. And cultural relativism, the technical definition, though people get this wrong all the time, is merely a descriptive observation that cultures seem to differ on moral viewpoints. Now, whether they're really that different is another matter, because there's a distinction between facts, moral facts, and moral viewpoints. Okay, but I'm just saying, if England didn't practice sati, which is where you burn the widow on the pyre of her dead husband, but Indians did. And so one could say, well, see, the British had one view of morality, and those in India had a different view. Now, that's not saying anything about whether one view is right over the other. It's not actually saying anything about morality. It's saying something about customs. And so it's saying that that different cultures just seem to have different points of view. Notice again, this is an anthropological statement. It is not a statement about morality or the nature of morality. Now, if somebody says, in virtue of that morality just is grounded in a culture's view, that's called conventionalism. Okay, and that each culture is obliged to follow the conventions of their culture. But different cultures have different conventions, and so what one culture thinks is right is going to be different than what another culture thinks is right. But if you're in culture A, you have to do like the Romans do, so to speak. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. And so conventionalism says that you have an obligation to do what your culture says to do. But that is a type of subjectivism, because in this case, the subject is a group of people, not one individual. So it's no different than relativism. It's just another species of relativism.
Okay, that makes sense. I think I should probably read your book.
Well, it's an easy read, I would say, and I do make the distinction of these different types of things. But I'll tell you, I have, over the years, and by the way, Dan, thank you so much for calling back. It's really sweet of you to engage me again, even though we have some very big differences on these issues. Okay, I think, as I recall, are you an objectivist? But the discussion was how you ground it without God. Is that the discussion we had?
Yes, I'm someone who feels fairly strongly that morality would have to have an objective basis. But I'm not a theist, so a lot of the conventional ways that people would ground it wouldn't be available to me.
Sure. And that was our prior discussion. So you and I share both those attitudes. We believe in objective morality, and we believe that it has to be properly grounded in order to be valid. And so you would be a moral realist, because you think that moral categories or moral claims or moral truths are grounded in something, are real features of the world. They are there are things that are actually wrong in themselves. There are moral properties that cohere with these behaviors, so to speak. Rape is wrong, and when we say rape is wrong, we're talking about rape. We're not just talking about our feelings. Okay, so we just share that view, and I realized I started out to make a different point, and then I got off on this rabbit trail, and I can't remember the point I was trying to originally make. But I know what it was. I think that the distinction between moral objectivism and moral subjectivism, or moral realism and moral non-realism, or these are sometimes difficult to make to people. And just last year, I think I came upon the simplest way to describe it, and that's just simply the inside-outside distinction. So if your morality is grounded inside of a human or a group of humans, inside the subject, well, that's subjectivism. If it's grounded outside in the object, then that's objectivism. And the object here isn't just another person. The object is behaviors, right? So it's the wrongness of rape is in the rape. It's not in my feelings about the rape, kind of thing. That, to me, is a simple way of characterizing it. So when you're talking to your friends, defending essentially the same view that I defend, that morals are objective, they're not subjective, maybe that's a tool you can use to help make this distinction between subjectivism and objectivism, or relativism and non-relativism, which would be objectivism too. So there are different words we can use to describe it, but it all kind of amounts to the same thing. And to me, I found the most useful way of distinguishing this is what I call the inside-outside distinction. If your morality is inside, well, that's relativism or subjectivism. If it's based on something outside, that's subjectivism. One reason this is really important, and I'll just toss this out here at the end, and that is because I don't think you tried to do this, but most atheists will try to ground morality in Darwinian evolution. Okay, that we have evolved these tendencies to believe. I'm choosing my words carefully here. We have evolved tendencies to believe certain things are right or wrong because it helps us get our genes in the next generation more effectively, to use Dawkins's language. So, okay, and you know what? That may be true for the sake of discussion. But if it is true, it is simply a relativistic system of morality. Because notice that the source of the moral truth, as it were, is inside the people who have evolved. Evolution can't make rape wrong. It can only make people believe rape is wrong, which is what the evolutionary answer offers. And all I want people to say is, if you want to go that way, okay. I mean, I have problems with whether evolution in the Darwinian sense can even do that. But even if it did, the best you come up with is another type of relativism, or relativism caused in a different way by an evolutionary mechanism, not by our acts of will and personal preferences. And so what ends up happening is those atheists who try to ground objective morality, and I had Michael Shermer, I debated Michael Shermer 3 hours on radio, and he kept saying he's a moral objectivist. And I said, well, where did your morality come from? Evolution. So he's claimed to be an objectivist, but he's grounding his evolution in a clearly relativistic way. And so he loggerheads with himself. And he didn't like that when I pointed that out. But he didn't, with all respect to Michael Shermer, very smart, got a PhD in sociology, he doesn't understand relativism, at least at that particular point. I don't know. So I'm blathering on because I'm using up the last 4 minutes of our segment here with you on the line.
That's fine.
Give you something to think about. All right, Dan?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
If I could just say, I've been listening to your show for several years. I really enjoy the show. I've learned a lot. I know I'm not exactly the target audience, but I've gotten a lot out of it. Just want to say thanks for everything you and your staff do.
Well, you're very welcome, first of all, and you are a target audience, because my goal, obviously, at Stand to Reason, we want to train Christians to think, et cetera, and to defend. Okay, but we're defending it before people who we think really need it, because there's a lot at stake. And Dan, you're one of those people. And so if you're listening, I'm not thinking, oh yeah, well, I'm glad he's on board, but he's not who I'm talking to. I am. I am. And I hope that something I say will put a stone in your shoe, will annoy you in a good way, and make a difference in your life. Anyway, got to go, Dan. There's my music. It's a pleasure chatting with you again. Call anytime. Greg Koukl here for Stand to Reason. Give them heaven, friends. Bye-bye.